Hello and welcome to Season 4 of On the Irregular with me, Java Berry. In previous seasons, I've chatted to women from all walks of life about their unique creative journeys, how they got here and how their story has shaped their creative process. For this season, I wanted to specifically explore the way in which grief informs the creative process, how transformative it can be, and how it weaves its way through our lives in many tangled ways, how it manifests in our work, and how we navigate the endless twists and turns. I cannot wait for you to hear these conversations. Each one moved me in a profound way, and often made me laugh and cry simultaneously. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to On the Irregular Season 4 on creativity and grief. For the final episode of Season 4, I talk with Undertaker and owner of the independent funeral service Natural Endings, Rosie Grant. After listening to several episodes of this season, Rosie reached out to me to suggest talking with me about her creative, personal, and as she described it, radical approach to honouring the lives of those we love. I have admired Rosie and her fellow Undertaker Lisa's work from afar via social media, so this felt like a true honour to be invited over for a chat, and the perfect way to end the season on creativity and grief. One grey July morning, Jon and I drove over to visit Rosie and Lisa in the old sorting office in the West Yorkshire town of Todmorden. Rosie has thoughtfully transformed the beautiful and characterful old buildings into a mortuary alongside a light and airy space for hosting ceremonies. Our conversation with Rosie was both moving and insightful, and because Jon was present to help out with recording and I knew he would have questions and thoughts, I invited him to chime in if he felt compelled to, which he did, although slightly muffled as he wasn't mic'd up. What came out of this was an incredibly open and vulnerable conversation about grief, honouring the lives of others, and developing our own personal rituals. I cannot wait for you to hear Rosie's fascinating story about how she first found her calling as an undertaker in the mid-90s through organising her own mother's funeral, how she navigated the very traditional world of funeral directors, her stint as a cabaret performer, her training as a psychotherapist, and then her return to her ultimate purpose as a funeral director. This conversation has stayed with me on a profound level, and the topics we discussed have ignited many important conversations with my own friends and family. Thank you, Rosie and Lisa, for inviting us into the beautiful space you've created and for demystifying the process of death, ritual, and grieving. We feel truly honoured. A gentle warning, this episode contains some swearing, mentions of infant death, and some references which may be upsetting. Welcome to the season finale of On the Irregular on creativity and grief with Rosie Grant. It is beautiful, my goodness.
Yeah, we're very lucky to have it.
Yeah. When did you acquire it?
I lose track of time. Maybe like two and a half or maybe 3.5 years ago, off the Royal Mail, because it was built 100 years ago by the Royal Mail.
Yeah.
And then they left it about 5 years ago. But because it was built by the Royal Mail, it was built for trolleys, no steps. So it makes it really accessible.
Of course.
So since you were here, we've also got an accessible loo.
Oh, okay.
So, the town are very fond of this place because it's where they pick their parcels up. Yeah. Not their bills, their parcels. And it's just, for its age, it's got a lot of natural light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see that. It's such a beautiful place for ceremonies.
Yeah, I mean, we have families that ring us up and they say they want a funeral at the crematorium, and then they walk in and they go, oh, no, we don't, we want to come here.
Yeah.
Pretty much every time.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So when I was working in Manchester, I used to go to people's homes to arrange funerals a lot.
Yeah.
Because I get a better idea about them with all their bits and pieces.
Yeah.
But I find if they come here, they're more likely to choose here and kind of own the space. Because in the crematoriums, everyone sits there passively.
Yeah.
Whereas they come in the day before and they decorate the space and they kind of take ownership of it and they're more likely to move around during the ceremony and things.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's honestly, we're living the Undertaker dream here. So we'll leave it is, it's very airy in here. Actually, I need a tissue because I will weep.
Yeah, you know what?
Because I just always do.
I was looking through your Instagram posts on the way here and I was welling up just reading them, and I was like, why didn't I bring any bloody tissues?
I look at an Undertaker and there's no tissues in it. Can I just...
I know, I completely forgot to...
Is it easy for me to grab some from somewhere?
Yeah, the cupboard to the left of the door, there's a million boxes of tissues in there.
Cupboard to the left of the door.
I don't know why there are.
Well, thank you so much for welcoming us into such a beautiful space, Rosie. It's lovely to have this conversation. So if you'd like to start off, do you want to tell me a bit about your background? Because we're in Todmorden in West Yorkshire. Are you from around here?
I'm from General North. I was born over in Lancaster and had quite an idyllic first 6 or 7 years in quite a nice hippie environment. Mm-hmm. And then my mum, who did make a few bad decisions in her life, moved us to quite a desolate part of East Yorkshire, where the bright lights were Hull. Right. So I spent quite a bit of my childhood there, and then I left 10 minutes after my last exam, never to return to the small seaside town that's called Withensea.
Okay.
But yeah, General North, and then I got a job. I didn't know quite how to leave home when I was 18 without, so I got a live-in job as a care assistant in Birmingham and then in Manchester. And then I studied in Manchester a degree called History of Design at what was called Manchester Polytechnic in the olden days.
Yeah.
And I was in Manchester, South Manchester for, I don't know, 25 years, something.
Yeah, it's easily done.
But during that time, I fell in love with a man living in Todmorden.
Okay.
And spent most of my weekends over here. And then my family moved over here and I was still in South Manchester. Mm-hmm. And then when I saw lockdown looming, I didn't want to be locked down in Manchester on my own. So I came over here and then didn't go back.
Yeah.
And then bought this building's across the road from my home.
Oh, okay.
That's how I knew about it.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, and the first sale fell through because of COVID, and then I just happened to know it was going on back on the market before anyone else. So, and I'd sold my little house in Manchester, so that's how
perfect.
I have this lovely place.
Oh, that's so amazing.
It's serendipitous.
Yeah, what a gorgeous story. That's just like perfect timing. And so, just going back to you saying that you studied a history of design, how did you start with history of design and now to this point of being a psychotherapist and Undertaker? What was the journey there?
Well, when I was younger, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And it was I'm 54, so it was in the last of the grants for university, so it was pretty much paid for. I know that a lot of younger people would be like, oh my God. But yeah, that was what it was like then. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, so I just went and did something that I was interested in. And that particular degree had a practical side to it. So we spent time in the 3D studios and the textile department and things, doing practical things, as well as the history of design. And I felt, apologies to people that studied history of art, but I felt it was a bit less poncy than history of art. You know, when I make things myself, I never feel confident about making art for art's sake. I make things that have a practical purpose.
Yeah.
So when I was younger, I didn't really have a very good sense of my own identity because I was quite enmeshed with my mum, which meant it was quite difficult to make decisions and know what I was interested in. She was quite a prolific artist, and I felt a bit intimidated by that, and I didn't really feel I could live up to her, but I just didn't really know what to do. I thought I might be a gardener, or I might just carry on in education for as long as I could possibly manage.
Yeah.
I didn't really know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was through my mum's death in 1995 when I was 25 that well, I can tell you that's a story in itself, but it was through that experience that brought me to one, undertaking, and two, the process of adjusting to the loss of my mum and finding who I was and my own identity, that led me to really strongly knowing what I wanted to do.
Wow. Yeah, because 25 is quite a significant age, isn't it? Right in the middle of your 20s, you're really kind of moving into adulthood. To lose your mum at that age. But then, like you just said, it sounds like there was a release in that as well.
Yeah. It was difficult because I was young. My friends were young. My friends didn't have any experience in how to support someone.
Yeah.
And we didn't have the internet. So, you know, for instance, I was very hit very hard, partly because I was so enmeshed with her. And I think it's difficult when someone's very enmeshed with someone when they die, because a bit of you dies and you can get quite confused about who you are. So we didn't have the internet. You know, people are quite grief literate now.
Yeah.
Due to podcasts like yours, the internet, more conversations about it, more media stuff. But it certainly wasn't in 1995 and in fact I was stood in Waterstones and I pulled a book off the shelf about bereavement and I read a bit, and I was with my boyfriend of the time who wasn't very good at supporting me, and I was like, look, I'm not going mad. This is grief. Look, it says in the book.
Yeah.
It says in the book. So that was a bit of a relief.
Yeah.
And then I did pretty much head for a nervous breakdown, actually.
Right.
But my friends couldn't bear being witness to that, so they took me off to the doctor, who gave me some Prozac, which was very trendy at the time.
Yeah, I remember.
And that sent me off the rails a little bit. In fact, this is really kind of a really awful thing, but some people even gave me condolence wraps of cocaine. I'd never had anything like that. You know, that's the kind of friends group I had.
Yeah.
But I didn't
like to perk you up.
Yeah, because they thought, oh, maybe she's going to be sad. So right, what's the solution to that?
Yeah.
And I didn't want that, because I did feel quite naturally that my grief was something that I just had to do, and there wasn't any way around it. There wasn't any way to speed it up. I kind of knew I had to do my bird. I had to do my grief.
Yeah.
And I was, I said I was feeling a bit mad, and I didn't know it was grief. I didn't want to take anything that made me feel. I just wanted to clutch at reality. Yeah. So I stumbled my way through. I think I must have, I probably saw a psychotherapist as well.
Right.
I did, actually. And I did have a smattering of friends that really supported me. And I stumbled my way through that, and then started feeling a bit better. And then I just woke up one morning and sat up in bed and went, of course, I should be an undertaker. Of course. And I rang a woman undertaker that I knew and asked if I could follow her around and learn how to do it.
Okay.
And she probably should have said no, because I was still in a bit of a state and I was still quite young.
Right.
But she was very kind. And she said yes. She hadn't opened her funeral home yet. She was kind of learning herself.
Yeah.
She was a mum kind of age, so she was quite nice to knock around with.
Yeah.
And get some mum energy. And we just had this estate car and this gigantic mobile phone, and we'd just get in the car. Sometimes we'd go to London to do a funeral, because alternative funerals were so unusual then. People would phone us all over the country.
Wow.
We'd get in the car, our long car, and with our big mobile phone and go and do these funerals. And just a totally steep learning curve. Her company Peace Funerals was just starting.
And how old were you at this point then?
Can't remember, maybe 26.
Gosh, so that isn't long after you.
Maybe 20. I think 26 maybe,
Wow.
yeah.
And how did you feel once you started to see the ins and outs of funerals and conducting them? Did you feel like you had found your calling?
Oh, totally, yeah, absolutely. Loved it. I mean, then we were meeting quite ahead of the curve kind of families, you know, because it was quite unusual. And having anything, I know it's hard to believe now, but having anything other than rent-a-vicar and a kind of, you know, what was quite unusual. Non-religious funerals were pretty unusual.
Oh,
so we were meeting some really interesting head of the curve kind of families.
Yeah.
And then because at that time, Peace Funerals were using other people's funeral homes, we would use different London funeral homes that were like, it's really interesting to go in there, and people in funeral world are quite an odd bunch.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was. I don't quite know how we did it. It was pretty wild, and then it wasn't long before they'd kind of send me off to London on my own. And I'd only just learnt to drive, so I was driving this gigantic vehicle in London.
Yeah.
Quite young meeting. Now I think, wow, these people are arranging funeral, you know, maybe middle-aged people arranging a funeral for a parent, like a 26, 27, 28-year-old.
Yeah.
Turn up.
Putting the trust in you.
Yeah.
Wow.
And Peace Funerals really believed in participation. So, you know, we would always offer a family to be involved in dressing their person with us, and and there was quite a lot of coffin making and all that kind of thing. So it was, I learnt a lot very quickly.
Yeah. And so did you stay with her for a while? With the woman that was, what do you call it? Peace Funerals?
Peace Funerals,
Peace Funerals.
They're in Sheffield.
Okay.
I was with them for a few years. And then they offered me a job in Sheffield, but that's where I'd supported my mum to die.
Okay.
And I didn't really have a good feeling for Sheffield. I'd been very depressed there because I was quite depressed from her diagnosis.
Yeah.
And then when I was looking after her, I was quite isolated in the house because she needed 24-hour care and I didn't have a great deal of help.
Okay.
My brother had a job and her friends were a bit flaky until I understood I had to explicitly ask for some help.
Mm-hmm.
So I turned down the job they offered me in Sheffield and stopped undertaking for a bit and did another job for a while, but really missed undertaking. And if I met people at parties and they asked me what I did, sometimes I would even say undertaker just because that's what I wanted to be doing.
Wow.
Yeah.
You felt that close to it.
Yeah. Even though the new job I had was quite glamorous and I was travelling a lot overseas doing cabaret, it was quite lonely and it didn't feel as authentic and meaningful as undertaking.
Mm-hmm. And so how long, so you performed, were you part of a troupe or?
I did what's called modern circus. So, and no, I'd be hired as but I would go to gigs and bump into lots of people I knew. That world was full of really interesting and lovely people. But I would travel a lot to the gigs on my own and things. So, and I'd fall asleep. So I'd get as far, because a lot of my work was in London, I'd get as far as Knutsford and sleep in the car in Knutsford because I couldn't get any further. It wasn't very glamorous at all, and it was quite isolating. So then I started training to be a psychotherapist.
Okay.
And I went back to undertaking by setting up with a traditional undertaker as my co-director. And that was in 2005.
And so where was that? Was that in Manchester?
That was in South Manchester, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And that was fine. It was brilliant to be back in undertaking, but he was quite conservative, and he was quite a determinedly miserable guy. He really wanted everyone to be as miserable as him. But after 9 years, he had a bit of midlife crisis and sold his traditional business and moved to Ireland. So I was left with Natural Endings, just me.
Okay.
Which was good.
Yeah. So how long were you with him then working?
9 years.
So it was full 9 years with him. Wow, that's a long time to wait it out.
Next year, Natural Endings is 20.
Oh wow, congratulations. Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. So why did you pair with somebody who had such a different outlook to you?
I just didn't realise at the time.
Right.
He appeared to be left-leaning, and I mean, when I say conservative, he was conservative with a small c.
Yeah.
He appeared to be left-leaning and things, but as I got to know him, he just was quite a grumpy guy.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a very relaxing environment.
Yeah.
And I probably I do believe all relationships are co-created, so I'm sure I played my part.
Yeah.
And it was okay, but it was much better to be doing things my own way. Because I would call myself quite a radical undertaker, and he would be upset. He would want me to dress the way other undertakers did, and that kind of thing.
Okay, so would you mind talking to me a bit about what the role of undertaker is? Because there are so many different elements. Would you like to run me through that?
Yeah. Well, undertakers operate in lots of different ways. So we're an undertaker that do absolutely everything. So we will go to where somebody's died, a hospital, hospice, private home, nursing home. And we've got particular equipment because obviously it can be quite physical, that part. It's a lot of lifting. So we've got different kinds of equipment for different kinds of taking into care. And then we'll bring somebody here and we wash them, and we have a mortuary, and we have a big cool area where they stay, so we look after them. Yeah. And then we meet with the family and talk about what kind of farewell they want for their person. We'll often offer them the opportunity to be involved in washing and dressing. And we just want to hear quite a lot about them and the kind of person they were. And then we put things in place for them, for the farewell, so booking crematoriums and wooden cemeteries, or sometimes arranging a gravedigger for a burial on their own land. And then we are with them on the day. And also we might book. Sometimes we have funerals that are more traditional, like the traveller community that we support sometimes are quite traditional, and they would want a lot of limousines and maybe a horse-drawn. So we have access to lots of different kind of hearse hire companies, so we might book one of those. Or if a family want something quite a little bit more relaxed, we've got our own estate car. And then we're with the family on the day, and we support them with, we introduce them to a celebrant or a minister, or we support them to do things themselves. We might have visits here. We might have a kind of ritual of decorating a coffin, or we might have a vigil, and that might be even in the evening or the weekend. You know, some of the vigils we've had here have been in the evening with fire pits outside and things. And then we support people on the day. We're with them on the day and take them through the day, going to wherever we go and things. And then we do a bit of pastoral care afterwards. We've made a great long list of all the things around here that you can go to on your own, particularly free things. Yeah. Because, you know, often people have got to kind of recalibrate, and they might want a bit of contact with people. Wow. And luckily around in Todmorden and Hebden Bridge, there's loads of things. It's a very good place to be bereaved around here. And then, so that's us being an undertakers. Some undertakers don't, I know it sounds a bit surprising, some undertakers don't do care of the dead. They subcontract that to another undertaker.
Okay.
But we do everything. Bigger undertakers, the tasks are given to different people, but because we're very little currently, we pretty much do everything ourselves. We've got a couple of casuals that when we get really busy, they will go to hospitals for us and things, or come out in the night with us, with one of us or something. And then as well as being an undertaker, we do a lot of death education and create arts events linked in with death and dying and mourning.
Wow. Because I noticed that you were part of I don't know if it was this year, when I was looking through your Instagram feed, I noticed that you were part of the Hebden Bridge Open Studios. How do you incorporate creativity? Because I mean, for everything that you've said sounds like it is a huge part of it, and you get the feeling of it just walking in, you can tell. But do you want to talk a bit more about that, about the creativity that feeds through it?
Well, I'd consider our role very creative. I mean, both Lisa and I are very creative people. I mean, I picked her because she was young, female and creative, which is pretty much unheard of in funeral world. Co-creating ritual with groups is very, very creative, and we believe that really good funerals are fully participated in. So I really would consider that the role, the creative role that I really enjoy and makes funerals really much better than they could be. I'd like to give you some examples of that.
Yeah.
But also, we like to have events that open up conversations around death and dying and mourning. So for Hebden Bridge Open Studios, before they stopped including Todd, we had an exhibition of 21 artists around the theme, and people came in, and we had a new film by a dancer as a response to her parents dying and the family home being sold, and 20 other pieces of work, and people came in and it opened up conversations.
Wow.
It was really, really amazing.
I wish I'd seen that. That sounds incredible.
Caroline Scott, the dancer, she I mean, they got through about 4 boxes of tissues. It was incredible, her little film.
Sarah Mason, did she film it?
Sarah Mason filmed it, yeah. Have you seen it?
I think I've seen clips of it, yeah.
Yeah, she's dancing around her parents' house, just like I think the day before she handed the keys over. It's incredible. We have other events. We had a curator from Leeds who was setting up an exhibition about with objects related to death from throughout the world, and he brought some objects here and gave us a talk.
Okay.
And the last one we had was about DIY and community funerals, because for my mum, it was kind of like a DIY funeral. I did an awful lot of it myself before I was an undertaker.
Wow.
So I really, really believe that people should be able to do that. So, we're giving information about that, because my job is only about 150 years old. Prior to that, the community took care of things, and although it sounds a bit counterintuitive and like I'm trying to do myself out of a job, I really want people to move back to that, and I think there is potential in our community, because the Todd's a particular kind of, and Hebden Bridge, particular kind of communities, to have a cultural shift to move more back towards that. So, for instance, our facilities, our mortuary that I'm going to show you, the public can hire a space in there and do everything themselves.
Wow.
And we can take care of their person, their special person. Or we can do, we're developing a menu called Pay As You Go. You see what? And, and it lists every last thing that we do.
Yeah.
And then people can choose to do some of those things for themselves,
Okay.
or to semi-do them by to do something and be a bit handheld, because
Okay.
it is.
Imagine.
You know, when we've really moved away from being comfortable with dead people.
Yeah.
I mean, culturally, nationally.
Yeah.
I mean, my colleague Lisa's Dutch, and most people go home the night before a funeral. You know, they are much more accustomed to being with people that have died.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when my mum died at home, and I was terrified of laying her out, but it was an older woman that was experienced that showed me how and made that a good experience.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I'd just had to get on with it on my own, I would have been quite frightened, and it would have been a very different experience. So some people might choose to do elements of the funeral with a bit of hand-holding from us,
Yeah. I can imagine.
which is what would have happened, an older person showing a younger person how to do it in the community.
Yeah. Of course, yeah.
So we're kind of, is it called newing the old?
Yeah.
Is that what it's called?
I don't know, but that would make sense, yeah. Yeah. Wow.
So we'll just, I feel like I'm doing all the talking.
That's what I want you to do.
Okay. I'll tell you about, so when I was 24, my mum got given a terminal diagnosis. We were quite surprised. She was quite a young mum. I mean, she was 46. And then she died a year later, and I was very depressed and not coping very well. And like I said earlier, I was supporting her to die at home, and I didn't get much help. But she said to me, you know, I said she was an artist. She said to me, I don't want one of those conveyor belt rent-a-vicar funerals. She didn't tell me what she wanted.
Yeah.
She told me what she didn't want. And she was a very creative woman, and she had a natural affinity towards ritual. I remember when she got rid of her alcoholic, awful husband, my stepfather, I remember her doing a ritual then to be rid of him, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think it involved making a doll of him and chucking it in a river or something. And I think her wedding ring went with it. And she would often make art outdoors quite ritually.
Yeah.
I remember her making a stupa out of nettles once, and because she was a quite committed Buddhist.
Okay.
But she was from a Quaker family. So
Wow.
the Quaker tradition, people used to, everyone participating and everyone being of the same, it's kind of not hierarchical.
Yeah.
And that it's everyone contributes if they feel like it. So yeah, she was used to kind of making ritual, but she didn't really say much about the ritual. She did commission a friend that was a cabinet maker to make a coffin. And she did tell me she wanted a woodland burial.
Okay.
And then I had to do the rest. Remember, this is pre-internet again.
Yeah.
But there's a charity called the Natural Death Centre. Have you heard of it?
No.
Oh my God, right. Well, it's an amazing charity that's been going for over 30 years that will give anybody free advice on anything to do with funerals. And they've got a lot of information on their website about doing things yourself, how to pick the right kind of undertaker for you if you do want to use an undertaker, where to get environmentally friendly coffins. You can even ring them up and get advice on the phone. So they had a book. There's that book at the end of the shelf there.
Oh, yeah.
That's the newest version. And that's where I ordered the book, and that's where I found a woodland burial site for her.
Okay, because I was going to ask, like, what are the legal aspects of that? I can't imagine you can just bury someone anywhere. Are there designated spots that you can conduct a burial?
Yeah, and they have planning permission for being a cemetery, and also they have to burials have to be a certain distance from watercourses and things, and sometimes you can't see watercourses because there's sometimes water tables under the ground that you can't see.
Right.
So yeah, they have permission.
Okay. So the difference between, say, a cemetery, a traditional one by a church, and a woodland burial ground would be that are the spots marked? Is the place marked where someone's been buried, or is it rewilded and?
They really vary massively.
Okay.
So a council might think, oh, we're supposed to have one of those woodland burial sites, so they'll just designate a strip of land somewhere that doesn't have marble headstones, and it's not really thought through.
Yeah. True
Woodland burial, there wouldn't really be any kind of headstone, and the grave might be marked by a number or not at all.
Okay.
And yeah, they are managed to encourage wildlife and things. And then there's quite a lot in between those two. So some of the ones we use regularly just will have an A4 natural local stone marker.
Right.
Wow. Yeah.
So going back to your mum's funeral, would you mind talking to me a bit about the rituals that you developed for it or performed?
I know it might sound, I am embarrassed about this because I looked into the woodland burial and we found somewhere, but not for one moment did I think what would happen to her between her dying and the burial.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing, but it just did not occur to me.
No, you're also in like the throes of grief.
Yeah.
You know.
I was disassociating a lot through depression and grief.
Yeah.
So she died, and I was like, what happens next? So I phoned the woodland burial people, and they were the people that were just about to set up an Undertaker's peace funerals.
Okay.
So she came over to the house and she helped me lay my mum out. And because it was late December, it was absolutely bitterly cold, it was very easy to keep her at home for a few days. Now, my mum's friends were mainly quite committed Buddhist friends, so they came and meditated with her body because they liked to have lessons in impermanence, and you don't get more of a lesson than that, do you really? So they came and did that, and I would go and I'd only seen one dead person before, so I spent a lot of time with her, just really acclimatising to the fact she'd died. But I did not want to take her down the windy, narrow staircase. I did not fancy that at all.
Of course.
So the peace funerals people came and did that for me.
Okay.
And they put her in the coffin that her friend had made for her. And we'd hired a really big, long car. And we hired a big thatched barn for her ceremony. And it was kind of a bit of a Quaker, Buddhist, non-religious mashup.
Yeah.
And it certainly wasn't the slickest. It certainly was not the slickest funeral ever. And I made a few mistakes. Like, my mum was also an art teacher, and I had no idea that a minibus of her students would come. And they were like, I think they were probably like 14 or 15 years old, and I had an open coffin. And that had not... I would never, ever kind of have people see a dead person without being given the option.
It's interesting
now.
though, because it feels like you're critiquing the funeral from a professional point that you did when you were young for your mum.
Yes,
on
it's
your
true.
own.
It's true. Yeah, I mean, also the way we thought about things then were quite different, because I think I stood and said, it's time to let my mum go.
Okay.
Because then we had quite a, what do you call it? I can't remember, modernist. The modernist view was that it was more a view that we're not so connected and we have to be quite autonomous and that we would just let go. Whereas now we understand that moving through bereavement, it's the holding on and the letting go and the integrating of that person within you.
Yeah.
And I think I even sang through a lot of snot, which is like, I would never sing publicly, so I don't know quite what happened there. Wow. I think I sang on oh no, that's it. I did the 100, wasn't singing, I did the 100 syllable Vajrasattva chants, which is the purity and death Buddhist chant. I'm not a Buddhist, I just learnt it because we did a bit of that with her when she was dying. Yeah, and I was trying to satisfy everyone. I was trying to satisfy my grandparents from the Quaker tradition, her Buddhist friends, people that didn't have a faith, you know.
Yeah.
And it was fine. So critique, 10 out of 10 for effort, 2 out of 10 for slickness.
It sounds extraordinary.
Yeah. And then her burial was the second burial, because woodland burial was quite new.
Yeah.
It was literally a furrowed farmer's field with ice on the furrows, and like now, I suppose 29 years later, it's becoming a woodland.
Okay.
Yeah. Full of butterflies and stuff now. It's really lovely. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
So.
Goodness.
Yeah.
And then how does the psychotherapy, I mean, it kind of feels quite evident as to how it could be part of it, but did you ever consider pursuing psychotherapy, or did you think that it would be part of your role as an undertaker?
No, I trained to be a psychotherapist, well, partly because I've had a lot of therapy in my life.
Yeah.
Anyway. And then I didn't think I would be able to go back to undertaking, I think because I didn't see any companies that I would want to work for.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't want to do things the way the co-op do. I just couldn't.
Yeah.
And I couldn't imagine having my own company. It seemed, I mean, I struggled with words and numbers, and I'm not a business person.
Yeah.
I could not imagine having my own funeral home.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd be a psychotherapist. Yeah. And then when I saw an opportunity to work as an undertaker again, I got into that. But the psychotherapy was quite helpful.
I can imagine it must be very helpful.
Especially since the kind of psychotherapists I had were quite creative. Mm-hmm. And in I was in a psychotherapy group for about 8 years, and the psychotherapist was quite skilled, and I think some of the work did involve kind of ritualistic things.
Mm-hmm. And do you, when people come to you, do you work with them, because I imagine celebrants possibly do this as well, but do you work with them on ritual and developing rituals and exploring how they'd like to mark, during the ceremony? Yeah.
From what I can see, the celebrant trainings in the UK are quite word focused.
Okay.
And in fact, funerals in general in the UK are even the non-religious ones, they're a little bit Church of England normative in that everyone is still quite passively sitting in their seats. Yeah. And then you've got one person presenting. I had an email from a celebrant this morning that said, blah, blah, I'll deliver. And I just, it makes me cringe, because these things should be co-created as a group, as an equal group, not with one person that's kind of, got higher up, So, Yeah, sometimes we do free trainings for celebrants in non-verbal aspects.
Okay.
But the really, really fascinating thing about someone would call a non-religious funeral is you don't have any go-to non-verbal aspects.
Yeah.
So in church, you might have candles, or you might have incense, or you might have kneeling at a certain point.
Yeah.
But that makes it really interesting because every non-religious funeral starts with a blank page and has to come from the community or the family.
Yeah.
So, which involves getting to know the person that's died and their community and their family, but makes the little things more powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So, some people, so what I would class as just not words, are things like embodying. So embodying might be like, we do a lot of funeral for artists. So for instance, we have a funeral on Monday for an artist, and there will be a table where people can make something. So they're embodying their artist mum, sister, grandma, by making something. Or it might be census things. We're supporting another family at the moment, and Dad made his living through cooking. And so it's important to include that kind of thing. Eating will be very important. Leaving with some food will be very important with that family. Other things, it might be more visual, or it might be smells, or it might be going for a walk. I would include singing and poetry almost as not words, because they're kind of a bit more than words, aren't they?
Yeah.
Playing music. I worked with the family once where music was their first language and words were their second language. And we took her coffin into her house, because funerals can be anywhere, and we put it next to her little grand piano in quite a small room, and 8 people played their oboes. There was hardly any words, so that 8 family members and oboes, 2 surprised carers, and it was beautiful because that was their language more than words. So what was the question?
About creating rituals and working with families. And
it's just because words only touch a part of us. When you have all those beautiful non-verbal rituals, it hits us in a different way. It makes a more magical experience. Nature, and the thing that, and like I said to you, brief people are the most astounding group to work with, because they are so open to signs and symbols. It's even amongst conventional undertakers, it's kind of joked about, which I think's a bit mean, but I heard a pallbearer saying the other day, oh yeah, they'll see a packet of crisps and go rolling along the street and they'll go, Mum loved quavers. But the point is that they are at a pivotal point, and they are searching for meaning of their person's life, meaning existentially or spiritually, and in terms of their own identity.
yeah,
So what we're looking for, and what a celebrant is looking for, is what is the legacy. So that is the legacy is the part that will carry on.
yeah, yeah.
So for instance, one family we're supporting at the moment, Mum trained to be a cook, and she passed this skill through doing and cooking with her 3 sons, and they are very, very into cooking. They say they're quite competitive with each other about cooking, and they will make cakes and bring cakes so they will. in the making of the cakes and the bringing of them, sharing of the cakes.
Yeah.
And when their friends have been ringing them to offer condolences, they've been saying, oh, when we were at university together, you taught me to make this. So that is the legacy that is more than the adult children, more than the grandchildren, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're looking, and the legacy is sometimes lots of different things. You know, it might be loving nature. You know, for me, one of my family legacies is loving being out in nature. And, you know, I felt these things, you know, I did a memorial walk for my grandpa the day before his funeral. Mm-hmm. And my grandma had just died 3 months before him. And we saw two birds circling as we walked. And to us, that symbolised them and their freedom from their 90-year-old bodies, and they always expected to be together after death in some way. So I can't remember what you asked me.
And but about Richard, I think that's really, I really wanted to talk about that, because I think that's so fascinating, and I think that's really interesting what you're saying about how so much of Rich was word focused, and like you're saying, a lot of celebrants. I'd never thought about it in that way, but that makes so much sense, that there's something really quite important, profoundly important about finding other ways, isn't there? And like, because I was thinking about when we lost our daughter Alma, we had no idea when they said to us, you know, because it was a late stage termination, she was a baby, and they said, we can organise a funeral for you. It will be like a group funeral, or you can do your own. And I had no idea about organising funerals, and so I think neither of us did, and we were in shock and in grief, and so we just said, you know, if you want to organise it. And so we went along to this funeral. It was like a month later because it was over Christmas, and it was a group funeral with these other babies, and there were all these, there must have been about 6 caskets, baby-sized caskets, and these red curtains, you know, parted, and there are the caskets. And then the accordion player started playing nursery rhymes, like Bar Bar Black Sheep. And it was terrible because all of this, just none of this was what we would have chosen at all. And it was terrible. I think we were kind of so in shock about it that we sat at the back and kind of giggled, like school kids. And we were there with other parents, grieving parents, and they were crying. It was such a strange experience. But then what I feel like we've kind of, in a way, found our peace with that we then took her ashes and we buried them on a hill, and every so often we go and visit, and we've taken our sons now, and just sitting there in nature is so... And you can say that, you know, you'll seek signs anywhere, but I do feel like when we're sat up there with her and I hear the grouse and I hear the birds, I feel like I can hear her, because she's part of it, she's part of the earth now. Because so much of grief is so difficult to verbalise, you know, and some people are incredible at it, but it's more than that, isn't it?
Yeah. And I'm really, really glad that you found your own way. And I would want to say to anyone that feels that they haven't had a satisfactory funeral, you can do it. You can still do something.
Yeah.
Anytime. You know, we've worked with people that didn't have a satisfactory funeral 45 years ago. You know, that can still create some ritual that is healing. And you know, there might be several rituals over the years, and it's I'm really glad that you found your own way, and that's what Undertaker should be doing, working with the creativity of the families that they're supporting and attuning, rather than just assuming.
Yeah.
I mean, I just found it really shocking that, what did you say, 6 grieving families were like brought together like that.
Yeah. I know, it's interesting when I think back at it that, you know, none of us knew each other, none of us had met.
No.
And the first time we met was all of us watching our babies in coffins. It was so
It was really
strange.
bizarre, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There was one. I remember there was one parent who she was almost like panicking. She sort of got up and she was trying to. I think she was trying to find the casket that had their baby in. She was kind of.
Because that's another thing. You had no idea which was yours.
I think she was asked to sit back down or something. It was really bizarre. It was a really strange experience.
You know what? I'd never thought of that. I just remember seeing that I hadn't thought we didn't know which one was her.
No.
It's really
No contact at all after.
Yeah.
We'd sort of had like half an hour with her.
Yeah.
And then it was a really strange sort of communication, wasn't it, around it? Like it's and I worked very near the hospital where apparently the body was kept, and I'd sort of go past every day, and I was like, oh wow, she's in there somewhere in this great big place.
Yeah.
No idea of how to access or whether we were allowed to or anything. And you just think, hang on, this is our child, and she's been taken care of in this huge institution by who, in what circumstances.
Yeah.
How did she get from there to the crematorium in Chorlton?
Yeah.
Why were we there? Really, the whole process was so managed in a really strange kind of
Well, I'm sorry it wasn't everything it could have been.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because that would have been an ideal opportunity to connect 6 sets of grieving parents to possibly support each other. And I really would hope that these days they're better at it.
Yeah, I feel like a lot has changed since then because when was
that then?
Was it about 10 years ago? It was 10 years, wasn't it? Because Griff's 8, so I think it was about 10 years ago because I remember at the time because she was 6 months in the womb when we had the termination, and I couldn't find any information anywhere, and we did have the internet, but I couldn't find anything about anyone speaking about it, and I wanted personal experiences. I wanted to read someone's really personal, detailed experience, and everything that I found was very kind of broad, and it felt very tactful. But I kind of felt like I felt brutal at the time. I felt like this is a brutal situation, and I want just like really raw honesty. And I really wanted to find experience, and I couldn't find anything. And then since then, I don't know what's shifted, but I think because it's also taboo, it's termination and baby death, and people often, don't want to hear about it. It's a really uncomfortable subject to talk about. So I wrote a blog post about it and went into detail because I just thought, I just hope that this reaches anybody that might want to know about it. And I put that up online, and it just got me thinking more and more. And then since then, I've seen just more and more. I think it's changed. I do think that people are kind of approaching grief, like you said, like we're more grief literate. It's like which is wonderful. I mean, someone recently I think described it as a bit like the grief trend. But I think it's just because it's so huge, it's so part of life, and we're all affected by it in so many different ways. I think it feels like a huge societal step in a way, for it to be just talked about and openly talked about more. So I don't know. It has changed. I don't know about in terms of I wonder if within the system how different it would be now. Because we worked a little bit with ARC Antenatal, and they're a charity. But we only found out about them years later, wasn't it? It was years later, and so we've raised money for them, and we raised money for the ward that we were on, because the midwives were incredible. They were absolutely incredible, dealing with birth and death at once, and the compassion and love. It really felt like love.
I'm really pleased that you had that then. Yeah. I think her birth was really as safe as it could be, I guess, as safe as it could be. So then we had that very strange funeral, but then we've created our own ritual since then, and it
just sort of highlights, doesn't it, how little we do kind of focus on on death and it being a part that we will all face at some point, because, you know, we as first-time parents were just focused on the bringing of life, and that's what our expectation. That's why that was kind of like it all crashed, didn't it? Because there was no foundation to know how we should approach that or how we should be, or and I think for me, I don't know. There's talked a lot about things being very wordy. And I don't know, there's just something that I think is really interesting, isn't there, about not just at the time of death, but I'm just thinking because we're very open with our boys now about it, and they know that they have a sister, and we have a little thing every year, don't we, on the 1st of December, where we just get a little box of memories out, and I'm sure they'll become part of that at some point when it feels appropriate. But sometimes, I don't know, I feel like it, because it's very, like the whole traditional approach to it and the traditional funerals, and it's like there's a certain way that you feel like you should be, and it's all very expressed through words, it's very wordy. I think sometimes that's a real barrier. It can be a real barrier, can't it, to know how to express your feelings. So like bringing that forward and the work like you're doing, bringing that and kind of educating and spending time with people, feel like, I don't know, there's a huge,
But that's it, words are very specific, whereas actions, signs and symbols, people can attach their own meaning. So if you've got a room full of people of different faiths, and you you release something up into the air, to the Christians that might mean heaven, to other people it might mean something completely different. So they're so inclusive, these other things, visual things, sensory things. I'm not inclusive in that people attach their own meaning, but inclusive for different people that process information in different kinds of ways. You know, I personally find, which is maybe why I'm drawn to this, a lot of verbal instructions quite difficult to process and take in, which is maybe why I'm quite attracted to these others. And I'm not the only one, am I?
Yeah, exactly.
So if you can have lots of different ways of communicating and connecting, because that's the other important thing about these rituals, is the connecting. And the way, I mean, you say your family rituals are really like that, but you get your special box out, and that at some point the boys, your children, will be part of that. And it'll probably evolves over the years, doesn't it? As your grief is less raw, and other things might come in. Keeping her Alma a really important. So Alma, really important. She's still a member of your family, isn't she? But there's non-verbal things.
It is. I think having that box is really just. I mean, we don't really have any memories of her, but it's like little things we've written or cards that we'd received, or objects that remind us of that time.
The thing about losing a baby, though, it's the loss of the hopes and dreams as well, isn't it? And the thinking and the fantasies about what life is going to be like and what they're going to be like. And I'm sure you feel their personality before.
Exactly. It is strange. It's strange to have lived with somebody for 6 months, but to have never met them in that way. It is strange.
Just thinking, like I think we have actually been quite creative in the way that we've dealt with our grief, really. Just in the sense that we create this ritual, and I don't know, the way sometimes it's hilarious how the boys talk about it, isn't it? They very openly talk to friends about their sister.
Our dead sister.
And things to make up, but I don't know why we have a tradition where I just buy a squirrel every to celebrate it, some kind of like a little brass ornament or a nutcracker or something. It's always a squirrel.
Yeah.
I'm just going to end up with this huge collection of squirrels that maybe will become that the boys can maybe explore in some way.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think we've been very careful not to kind of try not to pass on our grief to them, and very kind of protective in a way in that sense.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe as they get a bit older, and as our grief maybe lessons, maybe we'll start to explore a little bit more with them, because they're kind of just a bit like disinterested as well, aren't they? Really?
Of course, yeah. I think that's possibly why I really wanted to explore this with these conversations, is because it is fascinating how people do it, like find their own personal ways. Like, I was just thinking when you were talking about your mum and her being in the house, and it was a really cold December, made me think of my Welsh grandmother, because pretty much the same thing happened. My dad was living with her in South Wales, and it was a freezing December, and it snowed. She died, and there was a really heavy snow, and so the ambulance couldn't get to the house. And also where the house was, it's a town called Barry in Wales, and like all of the roads are incredibly steep, so ice and snow. So he spent, I think, a day and a night sat at the kitchen table while she was upstairs in bed, and she'd passed. And part of his way of processing it is he's always taken photos and developed his own photos. So he went upstairs and he took photos of her body, of her feet, her hands, and then developed those photos in his darkroom bunker at the bottom of his garden. And I've always thought about that night that he spent kind of vigil and processing it in a way, his way of understanding things, which is through a lens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's amazing, isn't it? Because that was circumstance and weather.
Yeah.
Otherwise she would have just... How did he feel about that? Did he like having that opportunity?
I think he did. I think, knowing him, he's not really spoken about it, but I don't think he was freaked out by it at all. I think he appreciated the opportunity to be with her in a way, even though he wasn't in the same room with her the whole time. But because I think also, you know, it's the childhood home where he still lives, and yeah, kind of that transition, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we say to people when someone's died at home, we can come when you're ready.
Mm-hmm.
You know, depending on the time of year, someone, if someone's been cared for at home, they shouldn't necessarily just be whipped away.
Yeah.
As soon as they die, and because I really think it takes a while, incrementally, to get used to the idea that someone's died.
Mm.
And the best way is to be with their body.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's. I think it can be quite a precious time. And yeah, that we hear things from, and families will do quite natural, ritualistic things without anyone prompting that.
Yeah.
It's a very natural response, you know.
Yeah.
Giving things, maybe flowers, and mainly telling stories in the presence of that person, you know. We did the only funeral in Manchester City Stadium ever.
Wow.
For the biggest Manchester City fan ever, and we were overlooking the pitch, and it was a lovely funeral, and it must have been in the winter, because I think the light was changing, it was getting a bit darker, and we'd placed a candle on. His season ticket holders always have the same seat, so there's a candle on his seat and his scarf, and the person that was inheriting the season ticket, I think it was his daughter, we watched her make her way through the stadium we could see the candle, and she took his scarf and blew out the candle, and it was so powerful.
Yeah.
More so than if it hadn't been done ritually.
Yeah.
I think the thing with ritual, sometimes it's, you can do ritual on your own. But there's something about other people bearing witness to it that's kind of makes it more powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's such a good point, actually. Yeah.
I mean, it's not essential. People do ritual on their own or in twos, and it's powerful. But a funeral is kind of quite a unique opportunity when you have that mass of people. And, you know, you have a lot of the family that you only see at weddings and funerals. People, you know, my partner sadly goes to funerals occasionally at the moment because he's just turned 60, so he might go to a funeral of someone he was at art school with or something, and they don't really see each other apart from, so they're really connecting. It's really important for a community to see the key people grieving, and that's what troubles me a bit about direct cremations at the moment when no one attends. You know, communities need to see who's hurting and who needs supporting, so that continues after as well, that support, and that they're treated kindly and attended to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
I suppose that's one of the things with a funeral for a baby. They're often quite small, aren't they? And the community aren't quite as aware.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Because there was no discussion during that at all about bringing family, or I think it was just, you can come along. I don't think there was any. Yeah. So therefore we didn't feel, or maybe didn't have the thought that actually it might be something that we'd want to invite our family to, because, you know, they were feeling a loss as well, weren't they? And they'd have no closure on that at all, really.
No chance to.
I mean, yeah.
I was just thinking about how formally we dressed for that funeral as well. We both.
The whole thing was totally bizarre.
Yeah, we both wore black clothes. I don't like that's because that's just what you do for funerals. Where we were going through this process, and actually, there's like choosing what you wear, what you'd like to wear to your child's funeral. It's like it's all of those things. My mum, I remember before her, it must have been about 15 years ago, we made a list of all of her favourite songs that she wants played at her funeral. So we put them on a CD and played them at her 50th birthday. So, you know, it's like, you can have them now, and then again when that time comes.
Oh, you see, that's great. People should be doing more of that. You know, it's constantly said, the person should hear the things that are being said at their funeral. And I think, everyone should have a desert island discs.
Absolutely.
Like way before.
Yeah.
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 A woman I know who was more of a Facebook friend, someone I very much admired, and it was really quite unwell, and I thought, I'm not sure you're going to be with us much longer. She hadn't said that formally, but she was looking for somewhere recently to have a party, but a birthday party, but she couldn't really be with people. She was very compromised with her immunity. So I didn't dare say have a living funeral, but I did say, why don't you come and have your party here, and we can open the doors, and you can kind of mainly be outside or be near the door if the weather's bad. It's because, I just wanted her to hear all the things that people were saying about her, and
I feel really strongly about that, about letting people know whilst they're alive.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess birthday parties serve that purpose a bit, don't they? I mean, I really think birthdays are important.
Yeah.
But it would be really. I think we should all have our own desert island discs every 60th and 70th and 80th and 90th birthday every year.
That's a great idea. Someone that I interviewed for this series, we talked a lot about her grief, but also about hoarding and about objects.
I listened to that one,
Susanna, and she has a podcast where she invites people on to shred a paper-based object from their past and to talk through it. And I said to her, oh, that's like Desert Island Discs, but kind of like the hoarding version. And it's such a lovely way of looking back over your life, I think, through objects, through songs, just moments in time and what that meant at that time.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful. Yeah.
Well, I loved when I was listening to that podcast, I was thinking, quite regularly here we burn things. We've got 2 fire pits. Yeah. I thought actually sometimes it would be more appropriate to shred things. Yeah. I've been thinking about having a series here called My Dead Artist Parent, because I'm not the only one that's got a large body of a dead parent's work.
Yes.
And sorry, Mum, I don't like quite a lot of it. But I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, it's a thing.
And I thought it's to reflect on your dead artist parents' life whilst showing their work.
Yep.
And then you can palm them off on other people that do like it.
I think that's... Yeah.
Sorry, Mum. So I'd like to do that.
I think that's a fantastic idea, because my mum and I have just been going through, because my mum's an artist and her mum was an art teacher, and we've just been going through all of my grandmother's work from when she was at Glasgow, and some of it I sold, some of it I kept, some of it was just so god-awful. It's like, but what do I do with it? There's a real, it's hard. I think that's a fantastic idea.
And then the other function that event would serve is, my own personal experience with major bereavements is I really had to calibrate my own identity.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was reflecting on who they were and the legacies and what that carries on in me. Mm-hmm. And I think if someone were to stand there and talk about their dead parent artist, it would really help in their own process of their own identity.
Yeah.
There's loads of things I'd like to do and not quite enough energy.
I mean, it sounds like undertaking is quite all-consuming.
It's weird, it's sometimes it's just really full on and everything's happening, and then sometimes it goes really quiet and we're just sharpening pencils and waiting for the phone to ring. It's there's no kind of but also different kinds of funerals and different kinds of families.
Yeah.
Arranging a child's funeral is very, very intense.
Yeah.
And my colleague Lisa, I've only ever seen her weep rolling down her cheeks with children's funerals.
Yeah.
They're very intense, because so we have to really think about self-care, and because we just
of course,
as you know, anywhere in Todmorden you can just walk and you're on the hill in a few minutes, so we use nature to soothe us. And then violent deaths are obviously, it's more difficult supporting people, but mainly we just feel like it's a natural part of life. It's a part of love. If you're not grieving, that means that if you never grieve, it means you've died very early yourself, or you've not loved, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, grief is love without a physical person.
Yeah.
So we tend to feel it's a natural part of life.
Yeah.
Because I myself have had a number of bereavements, some of which have felt like I was going mad, like I said earlier. I really trust that most people are going to be okay eventually. There's going to be quite shit for a bit, but eventually they'll get there. but community is a massively important part of a healthy grieving process.
Yeah.
And we're very lucky around here to have so many connecting activities and the soothing of nature.
Yeah.
That's why I said earlier it's a great place to be bereaved.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much, Rosie.
You're welcome.
You can find Rosie online at naturalendings.co.uk and on Instagram at naturalendings, or please head to the show notes for links. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of On the Irregular on Creativity and Grief. Please remember to review and subscribe, as it makes all the difference in helping other listeners find us.